Unbelievable transformation. How a housekeeper exposed the hidden heart of a ruthless mine owner. Clara's heart raced as she arranged fresh linens in the opulent guest room of Mr. Stevens' mansion. The lavish decor, gilded frames, and sparkling chandeliers always felt like a prison despite their beauty. Each polished surface reflected the stark reality of her life, a dedicated housekeeper in a coal mining town that had crumbled under the weight of greed. The burden of her husband's illness loomed heavy, and consequences of her dwindling finances felt insurmountable. Her days in the mansion grew darker with the shadow of the community's despair, filling her spirit with unease. She had never envisioned her life intertwined with someone like Mr. Stevens, a mine owner whose ruthless tactics had turned her neighbors into mere ghosts, their dreams swallowed by the endless pits of coal. Yet here she stood, trapped in a gilded cage, cleaning the remnants of a wealth that came at a severe cost. With her husband's health worsening, she felt the gnawing fear that her meager paycheck was all that separated her family from ruin, a reality that suffocated her every thought. As she dusted a heavy oak desk, her fingers brushed against something unexpected, a bundle of letters, yellowed and worn, tucked away like forgotten memories. Curiosity sparked as she carefully unfolded the fragile pages. The words painted a tale that revealed more than just the past. They spoke of pain, sacrifice, and a history intertwined with the town's weary families. Mr. Stevens wasn't just a ruthless businessman. He was the product of a legacy fraught with struggles, much like her own. Each letter consumed her with conflicting emotions. The bitterness of his actions weighed on her, yet the humanity of his words pulled at her heart. Was it her place to expose the man behind the facade? Would doing so betray her job, her only means of survival? Clara felt her muscles tense, her breath uneven. Adrenaline surged within her as she grappled with this unsettling dilemma. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Each day, Clara faced the heavy sadness of her community, but this discovery pondered her next move. Would standing up for them mean losing her security, her home, her husband's treatment? The letters formed a bridge to a truth she had to confront. Clara's mind raced with uncertainty. She felt the mounting pressure pulling her toward an unimaginable confrontation with a man simply known for his coldness. As she paced the marble floors of the mansion, Clara found herself caught in a whirlwind of thoughts. The records haunted her, telling a story of lost potential, like the townsfolk she loved. And at that moment, she understood this wasn't just about the letters or exposing Mr. Stevens. It was about reclaiming her voice. But courage had its costs, and as she approached the threshold of the study, Clara could nearly taste the recklessness of her resolve. The sudden knock at the door yanked her from her thoughts. What news awaited her this time? Ready to alter her fate all over again? The world seemed to hold its breath as she reached for the handle, unaware of the monumental shift awaiting her on the other side. Clara's hand hesitated for a heartbeat on the polished doorknob, the weight of potential revelations pressing down on her chest. What awaited her beyond the threshold felt both electrifying and terrifying. With a deep breath, she swung the door open, ready to confront whatever destiny had in store. Standing in the doorway was Mr. Stevens himself, his expression a paradox of annoyance and surprise. "Clara," he began, his voice edged with impatience. "I need you to tidy up the lounge before the guests arrive. There is no time for distractions." His words felt like a cold splash of water, awakening the simmering defiance within her. Before she could respond, however, a flash of vulnerability crossed his features, reminiscent of the emotions she had glimpsed in the letters. The realization struck her: the man standing before her was a complex tapestry of triumph and despair, but she was more than just a servant. "Of course, Mr. Stevens," she replied, the acquiescence an instinctive response born of years spent in subservience. Yet, as she walked away, a new determination ignited inside her. The stark divide between them crumbled in her mind's eye. He was not just a figure of contempt, but a being shaped by his experiences. Just as she had been in the opulent lounge, Clara's hands flew over the furniture, but her mind raced even quicker. Each movement felt like a rehearsal for a conversation she had yet to prepare. The letters spun in her thoughts like a whirlwind, urging her to abandon her fear and embrace the power of her voice. She was a part of this world, no longer a mere observer trapped in the shadows. She dusted the plush sofa. Clara's resolve crystallized. She would not allow the threat of losing her job to dictate her actions. She couldn't ignore the growing despair among her friends and neighbors. They were fighting for survival, and she would fight for them too. "Clara," Mr. Stevens called from the hallway, snapping her from her reverie. "I need the final touches on that report before the meeting." "Of course, sir," she replied curtly, surprising even herself with the assertiveness in her tone. The task felt less like an obligation and more like an opportunity, an opening to learn, to observe, to understand the inner workings of his business. What if, by the end of the day, she could gather the strengths needed to face him? The meeting room smelled of polished wood and anxiety. As the men around the table engaged in heated debate over profits and losses, Clara quietly entered the space, carrying the requested documents. The men barely acknowledged her presence, voices rising above her head like a distant storm. But for Clara, the cacophony morphed into clarity. Here lay a world of power and wealth, one that had inflicted pain on the vulnerable, and she now understood it by being part of it. For the first time, she started to see opportunities lurking amidst the shadows of greed. Perhaps her role could stretch beyond cleaning. Perhaps she could use her position as an entryway to gather intelligence, understand his motives, and devise a way to confront him not just as a housekeeper, but as a woman wielding newfound strength. She exited the room, trepidation intermingled with determination. The weight of her family's struggles merged with the potential for change, and Clara realized that she was on the cusp of a transformation far greater than she had anticipated. The question no longer lingered if she would confront Mr. Stevens. It became clear that she not only would, but she was ready. She longed to expose not just his hidden heart, but her own unyielding spirit that dared to challenge the status quo. But would her revelation come before she lost her nerve? Or would the storm brewing inside her burst forth and ignite a reaction she could never take back? Clara stood in the dim light of the hallway after the meeting, her chest heaving with anticipation. The atmosphere around her buzzed with the kind of electricity found just before a storm, one that signaled change. With each passing moment, she felt the gravity of her decision solidifying inside her, a deep-seated determination to challenge the boundaries imposed on her. The clatter of heels echoed behind her, and she turned to find Mr. Stevens at her shoulder. He extended a hand and motioned toward the now empty meeting room. "That was rather disorganized," he remarked, the irritation creeping back into his voice. "I expect more from my staff." Clara felt her pulse quicken, the tight coil of anxiety being pushed against the walls of her resolve. "Sir, I do believe the discussions are necessary," she said, allowing her voice to carry a steadiness she did not quite feel. Perhaps he was probing her, or perhaps he simply sought to undermine her budding confidence. "Understanding the dynamics of your business is important, isn't it?" Mr. Stevens paused, a flicker of surprise dancing across his features. Clara's heart raced as the implications of her words hung in the air. In redefining their relationship, she risked everything. But within that risk lay the potential for liberation that he regarded her carefully, as if calculating her worth beyond the confines of the housekeeper's uniform. "You seem different today," he commented, a hint of curiosity threading through his annoyance. Clara felt emboldened by his observation. Her small victory were moments like these where realization dawned on him, however fleeting it might be. "Yes, I have begun to recognize the value of my perspective," she replied, lingering on her words slightly longer than necessary. This time, the boldness felt natural rather than forced. "I see the foundation of your empire built on the very labor and struggles of families like mine. How can we not speak up when those voices remain unheard?" As she spoke, Clara noticed the way Mr. Stevens stiffened, an edge of defensiveness settling over him. Yet she also caught a glimmer of something else. He was listening. The shift felt monumental, akin to the first crack in a dam. It was not just a conversation. It was an opening of dialogue, a chance to define herself as more than a servant. Be careful, he warned, his tone shifting to a more serious note. Words can have consequences, and silence can be just as damning. Clara shot back, her spirit rising like steam. She had never thought to be so forthright, but here she was, invoking a fearlessness that felt intoxicating. Each revelation about herself and Mr. Stevens peeled away layers of their established roles, transforming the air between them into arena one charged with the potential for conflict and, perhaps, understanding that as they stood there, time seemed to hang suspended on the precipice of a new possibility. Clara felt hope mingle with trepidation. Whatever the outcome, her actions were carving a new path forward, one where she chose authenticity over complacency. Each word resonated deeper with the dual purpose of revealing her inner strength and challenging his authority. However, her heart sank slightly as she recognized the weight of his gaze. What if he decided to shut her down? What if he expelled her from his domain altogether? Clara's resolve wavered, but she quickly clenched her fists, grounding herself in the fire of determination. Today, I want to retreat into the shadows, she declared aloud. I will remain a visible part of this world, demanding the respect we deserve. Mr. Stevens blinked, perhaps overwhelmed by her challenge, or perhaps intrigued. The space around them filled with tension, and it dawned on Clara that the confrontation she sought was not solely with him, but also with the remnants of her own hesitations and fears. But one question loomed larger than the others. Would he rise to meet her boldness, or would their exchange mark the end of her newfound courage? As she watched him grapple with this choice, Clara sensed an imminent collision, the perfect setup for a confrontation she had been unknowingly preparing for her entire life. But as moments turned into an agonizing silence, she could only wonder if she was truly prepared for the impact. Clara held her breath, the tension wrapping around her like a shroud. Mr. Stevens' expression was inscrutable, a mix of frustration and something akin to respect in uncharted territory for both of them. She could see that he was weighing the implications of her words, and she was aware that whatever he decided would define the trajectory of her life. Visibility? He finally repeated, his voice low. You think that's what you want? Yes, she asserted, the fire in her belly pushing her forward. Visibility means accountability, not just for me, but for the powerless. I refuse to be a silent witness to the disparity that defines this workplace. Mr. Stevens' brow furrowed. He was clearly unaccustomed to such an affront. Clara had merely put in motion the possibility of transformation, yet fear loomed like a specter at the edges of her conviction. What if this moment shattered any sense of progress she had made? The thought electrified her resolve. That's a naive belief, he said, masking irritation behind a veneer of rationality. People fear change. They cling to the status quo, even when it's detrimental. But those fears are what keep us chained, Clara countered. You can choose to perpetuate them, or we can face them together. I believe we can create something better. She watched as his defenses flickered like old lights struggling to stabilize. The power of her voice reverberated in the silence, and she felt the weight of her own strength. It wasn't just about this moment anymore. It was about everything that had led her here, the years of silent toil, the compromises made in the name of survival, the dreams choked by convention. Do you really think your voice matters in a place like this? He challenged, his gaze piercing. Yes, Clara affirmed, the word echoing within her as both a declaration and a mantra. It matters because I am here, speaking up for others who are not given a platform. Each word is a step toward that platform. Mr. Stevens appeared torn, the flicker of contemplation crossing his face. Clara felt the rush of adrenaline surge anew, a rushing river of potential breaking through. She was no longer just a housekeeper. She was a catalyst for change, wrestling against the current of decades-old precedents. The silence stretched, filled with unspoken questions. They stood ensnared in a moment of mutual recognition. She was no longer afraid, and he was no longer unchallenged. This confrontation had sparked something deeper within her, a bubbling resolve that felt invigorating. Fine, he relented, his voice now devoid of its earlier harshness. You have your visibility, but you will find that accountability has its price. A rush of exhilaration mingled with apprehension washed over her. Clara understood this was a turning point, but the weight of responsibility settled heavily. She wasn't merely staking her position, She was beckoning others to rise alongside her. But it also meant caution. She'd have to navigate through raw currents, and some might not welcome the change she envisioned. Let it be a price worthy of change, she stated, the defiance still sparking within. As Mr. Stevens turned away, something shifted not just in the room, but within the universe they inhabited. Clara knew she had tugged at the threads of fate, and they wouldn't easily go back. With each passing second, she felt the pulse of her journey quickening, pushing her to new horizons. Yet, the shadows lurked. The consequences were still uncertain. Would the embers of her courage ignite a fire for others, or would they highlight her isolation? Her mind raced with what lay ahead, trouble brewing just beneath the surface of this newfound power. As she walked away from the meeting room, a question echoed through her thoughts. What was the price of awakening a slumbering giant? Clara could sense the confrontation was only beginning, and her heart surged with determination. But would she be prepared for the path that unfurled before her? The days that followed Clara's bold confrontation blurred into a whirlwind of anticipation and anxiety. The air in the workplace felt charged, a static energy that thrummed with unease. Clara moved through her tasks with a newfound focus, but doubt clawed at the edges of her resolve. Each time she caught a coworker's eye, she wondered if they could sense the change and whether they were willing to join her in this precarious fight. She found herself waking earlier, her mind racing with what was to come. In moments of solitude, she reflected on her words to Mr. Stevens, unraveling their depth as if scrutinizing a piece of fine art. She had named her desire for visibility and accountability, but now the broader implications gnawed at her. Could she bear the weight of accountability herself? Was she prepared to stand firm as the battle lines drew across the company? Clara's workload increased, yet so did her determination. Each shift felt less like a chore and more like a foundational stone laid in the enterprise of awakening her colleagues. She began cataloging the conditions that held her peers in silent suffering. A discussion here, a nod there. She gathered fragments of stories that seemed to sprout from the cracks of her workplace, stories of overworked staff, instances of mistreatment, and the systemic fractures that kept them all shackled. One afternoon, as she scrubbed the tiles in the break room, she overheard the familiar murmur of her colleagues just outside. Their voices, a litany of complaint, coalesced into grievances against not only their working conditions, but also against a corporation that seemed determined to squeeze every ounce of labor without offering recognition or respect. For the first time, Clara didn't feel like an outsider to their plight. She felt anchored by their shared struggle, ignited by the stories she had heard. "I think we should do something," softly suggested Lisa, a fellow employee who often pushed herself to keep spirits up. "But what? We can't just go up against them without a plan." Her heart raced at this moment of potential. Clara stepped forward, her voice steadier than she felt. "We can start by organizing our concerns. We need our voices to carry weight. We deserve the opportunity to speak up without fear." The room fell silent, eyes turning towards her. It felt like standing on the precipice of a great chasm. One false move could bring everything down. Yet within the silence, Clara perceived a flicker of interest. Inspiration danced in murmurs of agreement, followed by cautious questions. "Do you really think it'll make a difference?" someone asked, skepticism hiding behind their curiosity. "Yes," Clara urged, meeting each questioning gaze with unyielding sincerity. "We can't change what we tolerate. It starts with us acknowledging that we have the right to demand more." That evening, Clara's mind raced with thoughts. Plans were starting to form, but uncertainty loomed over her like a storm cloud. She understood the landscape was fraught with risk, yet the challenge ignited her spirit. The burgeoning concept of organizing her colleagues felt both daunting and exhilarating. Yet as the echoes of her new role as an instigator settled, panic whispered caution in her ear. What if they were met with hostility? What if Mr. Stevens or someone higher up decided to crush this movement before it even began? Would she be placing her colleagues in danger, all for a dream of visibility? Clara stood in the dim light of her small apartment, the reflection of the evening's discussions illuminating her thoughts. She needed clarity, a moment to sync her heart and mind. Each choice she made, moving forward, would not merely impact her, but the very fabric of those who had confided in her. There was no turning back now. As uncertainties mounted, She found herself at the threshold of a defining choice. Would she muster every ounce of her courage to forge a path for others, or retreat into the comfort of the familiar? The weight of her decision pressed heavily upon her. She needed to decide soon. Her heart raced, caught in a tight coil of desperation and hope. Reflecting, she whispered, "Am I brave enough to challenge the giants before me?" And as she prepared herself for the impending confrontation, another question crept in: would she discover hidden strengths in herself, or find the shadows were far more formidable? Clara's mornings had transformed into rituals of resolve and quiet preparation. As the sun peered through her curtains, she visualized the conversations she would have with her colleagues, each one a delicate thread in the tapestry of change she was weaving. She mechanically brewed her usual cup of coffee but savored the rich aroma. Realizing her days now held purpose beyond the daily grind at a tea work, the break room buzzed with an unfamiliar electricity. Staff milled about, sharing more than just small talk. Clara's presence was no longer that of an invisible hand. She was part of a burgeoning dialogue, each anecdote shared reinforcing their collective determination. But as they huddled together, Clara sensed the duality of hope and fear in the air. The anticipation of change was palpable, yet intertwined with the dread of retaliation. During a lunch break at a nearby park, Clara chose a secluded bench, an oasis for contemplation. She considered Lisa's assertions from their earlier meeting. The thought of organizing their grievances gnawed at her. Without a tangible plan, were they merely whistling in the wind? Her fingers danced nervously over her phone, deliberating whether to draft a proposal or outline a strategy. Doubt crept in: would her colleagues truly rally together, or was she naively leading them into a battle they weren't prepared to fight? The clarity she sought seemed just out of reach. That evening, a sharp resolve pierced through her hesitation. Clara rummaged through her old notes, recollecting strategies from leadership and group dynamics courses she had taken years ago. She would anchor their mission in facts and stories, each detail an indelible proof that their grievances were not mere complaints, but shared experiences deserving validation. She found solace in this organized approach, alleviating some of the weight pressing down on her conscience. AS days morphed into weeks. Clara's office transformed into her command center. She compiled accounts from co-workers, recording their challenges and triumphs, as if documenting a tapestry of resilience. Determined, she reached out to those she sensed might lead with her people with charisma, credibility, and, above all, experience. Clarity emerged from the chaos. They crafted an email, an invitation to a meeting, fostering heartfelt discussions over coffee rather than fear-laden whispers in shadowed corners. But as their plans solidified, uncertainty clawed at her like a scavenger. Was she truly equipped to lead this? The idea of confronting Mr. Stevens and his administration weighed heavily in her gut. She envisioned their smug rejection, dismissing her efforts as trivial. Yet as she rehearsed her arguments late at night, the emotional fabric of her initiative sprang to life. She wasn't merely fighting for recognition. They deserved dignity, respect, and a space to thrive. Finally, they scheduled their inaugural meeting. The anxious tension felt like an electric charge pulsating in the air as Clara entered the conference room, flanked by those who had once hesitated but were now standing beside her. She looked at their determined faces, and for the first time, Clara felt invincible. Each individual was a soldier in an unseen battle for their rightful place. The opening conversation ignited. The room filled with the fortifying sound of voices combining into a singular cry for accountability. They exchanged fierce resolve and compassionate understanding, transforming apprehension into an empowering force. Yet, as clarity paved the way to possibility, a chilling realization crashed over her. What if the corporation's response cut deeper than she had ever expected? The echo of Mr. Stevens' disdainful tone lingered in her mind. In the midst of fostering hope, she felt the fear of a systemic backlash lurking just beyond the horizon. With her heart pounding, Clara's mind raced, contemplating not just their next steps, but what it truly meant to step into the light of confrontation. The stakes had risen. Had she ignited a fire of solidarity, or was she merely fanning the flames of despair? The moment had come, her path etched with consequence yet unknown. Would she be lauded as a trailblazer or scapegoated as a disruptor? This was more than a personal journey. It was her cry for justice ringing in the corridors of a Titan's castle. The moment had arrived, but would she emerge fortified or shattered? Clara took a deep breath, her chest tight with anticipation as she faced her colleagues, each of them driven by a shared mission that now felt real, tangible. But doubt lurked, it always did. What if the conversation spiraled into chaos? What if their voices fell silent against the indifference of the administration? She felt the weight of the moment and the undeniable urgency of choice as she began to speak. Clara felt the familiar tremors of vulnerability. "Thank you all for joining today. I know we all have reasons for being here," she said, her voice rising above the noise. Each pair of eyes reflected hesitation, hope, and a lingering fear of backlash. "This isn't just about us. It's about making our workplace a better environment for everyone." One by one, stories flowed into the discussion like a river breaking through a dam. Chester spoke of nights spent worrying after an unjust reprimand, while Lena shared how constant overtime had drained her spirit. Clara could see that these moments turned the abstract notion of grievance into concrete reality. The room buzzed with a shared understanding that ran deeper than any of them had realized. But as each voice rose, Clara felt her own pulse quicken with a daunting thought. What if they voiced their truths only to face retaliation? Halfway through, Clara paused and allowed herself a moment of reflection. The community she sought to foster was blossoming in front of her eyes, but as the vulnerability unfolded, it provoked the inevitable. What if we rally and they respond with silence? Or worse, punish us for bringing these issues into the light? The specter of Mr. Stevens danced on the periphery of her thoughts. The meeting culminated in a palpable tension as they decided to draft a formal letter outlining their grievances. Clara felt a surge of adrenaline at the prospect, but fear clamped down on her thoughts. Was it naive to believe they could enact real change? Transforming raw emotion into structured demands would require not just courage, but undeniable resolve. As they drafted points for the letter, Clara's pen glided over the paper almost automatically. Each point became an act of defiance, an embodiment of their collective pain, and each stroke soothed the anxiety coiling in her stomach. But lingering doubts whispered against the backdrop of her growing determination. Was she prepared for the fallout? How could she lead this if her intentions could easily be twisted against her? After hours of discussion, Clara proposed a final point: clarity on job safety. "We need to ensure our work environment is safe, not just physically but also emotionally," she asserted, looking around the room. She locked eyes with a few of her colleagues, recognizing in them a shared fear but also burgeoning strength. In that defining moment, a thought crystallized in her mind. True leadership was about vulnerability, not just strength. It was about the willingness to stand naked in their truths despite the risk of exposure. Risking everything for justice would invite danger, but the very act of claiming their voices was a radical step towards empowerment. Clara decided then and there that she needed to confront Mr. Stevens directly, to not just submit the letter, but to demand a dialogue, a face-to-face confrontation. As the meeting wrapped, a new fire ignited within her. She had transformed from hesitation to agency. With every heartbeat, she felt the tide of possibility shift. Nonetheless, the question loomed: could she withstand the backlash that was bound to follow? When she finally sent the email, the sensation was electrifying and paralyzing, a hopeful thrust into the unknown. But what awaited her could shatter everything she had built. Clara was stepping onto a treacherous path, and the true test of her resolve lay ahead. The moment of confrontation would be inevitable, but she needed to prepare for the consequences. What would happen when the door to Stephen's office opened? Would she walk in as a newly formed leader or be ejected as a mere nuisance? As she left the conference room, the air was thick with uncertainty, and Clara felt the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. The path forward gleamed with possibility, but scorching doubt simmered just beneath the surface, a stark reminder of the stakes that loomed large on the horizon. The time had come to face the man whose power could either validate their fight or extinguish their voices permanently. How would she navigate the storm? Her heart raced in eager anticipation, waiting for the moment when she would reach for the door handle of Mr. Stevens' office, not knowing if it would lead to liberation or despair. Clara paced in front of her desk, the fabric of her work blazer cool against her skin, but unable to fully ward off the heat of her racing heart. The clock ticked ominously, reminding her of the meeting that loomed ahead, an encounter that had the capability to redefine not only her career, but also the very culture of the workplace she had come to know inside out. The weight of the letter, now neatly folded in her pocket, pressed against her side like a stone. With every step back and forth, she mentally rehearsed her words, crafting sentences that might convey her resolve without stoking the fires of Mr. Stevens' ire. Could she persuade him? Clara wrestled with the notion that her entire argument could crumble under scrutiny or, worse, invoke retaliation that would silence her and her colleagues. Yet, she acknowledged, leadership demanded confrontation, even if it felt perilous. Focus, Clara. The whisper slipped through her thoughts like a reminder, breaking through the cycle of doubt that threatened to entrap her. She thought back to the stories that had surfaced during their meeting, the raw pain, the palpable outrage. Each anecdote was a thread pulling on her resolve, urging her forward, validating her purpose. They needed her to lead. She rolled her shoulders back, feeling the tension dissipate, even if slightly. Time seemed elastic as Clara checked her watch for the third time. With every passing second, the fear of inadequacy danced with her yearning for change. The office, with its sterile walls, felt more like a cage now, and she longed for freedom, for the ability to voice the unspeakable truths that had long haunted their environment. Finally, when the prescribed hour reached its peak, Clara squared her shoulders and headed toward the door of Mr. Stevens' office. The corridor stretched before her like a gauntlet, each step heavy with consequence. Each footfall sank deeper into her psyche, echoing her internal struggle. She had waited too long to address grievances stitched into the fabric of their daily grind. Now, with her heart throbbing like a war drum, hope mingled with fear as she approached the door. The brass handle felt unusually cold in her palm, sending a shiver through her. Clara entered and faced Mr. Stevens, his back turned, entirely engrossed in paperwork that seemed unyielding. "Mr. Stevens," she began, her voice firmer than expected. The sound washed over her, chasing away shadows of uncertainty. He turned slowly, eyes assessing her presence with a mix of curiosity and impatience. "Clara, this better be important," he remarked, folding his arms, the air thick with tension. There it was, the throne of authority, and she was now face to face with the gatekeeper of change. Clara could see the escape routes in the room. A quickly drawn breath reminded her that her escape was to confront rather than flee. "It is important," she stated, her tone unwavering despite the weakening of her knees. "I'm here to discuss a letter signed by several of my colleagues." The corner of Mr. Stevens' lips curled slightly, a hint of disdain flickering in his gaze. "A letter? I see." Clara felt a deepening resolve, a fire kindled to illuminate paths untraveled. "It addresses concerns about workplace safety and safety?" He cut in, his tone laced with skepticism. "You think your small group can challenge the way this company runs?" Those words ignited her resolve. "It's not just a small group," she emphasized, stepping closer as if to invade the fortress he had built around himself. "These are voices that haven't been heard, and they matter." With each syllable, Clara realized that she was stepping out of the shadows not just for herself, but for those who had hidden in fear. No longer merely a housekeeper with grievances, she was a leader in the making. The confrontation was evolving, each moment like a stone flung into a pond, generating ripples she couldn't yet foresee. The reaction on Mr. Stevens' face was unpredictable. His expression shifted between irritation and intrigue. Would he dismiss her? Would he recognize the legitimacy of their concerns? Clara's heartbeat drummed loudly in her ears, yet she pressed on, prepared to expose her intentions. "We are asking for an open dialogue, to find solutions together." As the tension hung palpably in the air, Clara braced herself for what he might say next. Would she emerge victorious, or be confronted by a wall of rejection? The fate of their movement could pivot in a single statement. The depth of the moment lingered. Each choice she made now shaped not only her destiny, but the trajectory of countless others. What would be revealed in this confrontation? Mr. Stevens' gaze narrowed, a flicker of irritation dancing across his brow. Clara felt the weight of his scrutiny prickling her skin, as if he were peeling back layers of her resolve to expose any hint of doubt. The line between courage and vulnerability blurred as she stood her ground. Open dialogue, he echoed mockingly. And what makes you think I want to waste my time on whimsy from you or your small group? You see, Clara, this is a business. We deal in results, not feelings. Her heart sank slightly, but ignited simultaneously with indignation. Was she merely another cog in the machine of cold economics? The vehemence in his voice tore at her, provoking a wave of determination. With all due respect, sir, this is about productivity and morale. Overlooking the realities faced by your employees is not what forward-thinking leadership entails. If we are uncomfortable, our work suffers. If we are silenced, our talents are wasted. His lips twisted, caught between annoyance and begrudging acknowledgement. Clara seized the moment, propelled by an urgency she hadn't felt before. Let us talk about what can be done to create a collaborative environment. It's not just about following orders. It's about cultivating a workplace where everyone feels valued. The cadence of her speech quickened as she envisioned the faces of her colleagues, their hopes for change, igniting a burgeoning sense of empowerment in her. She had always believed in the strength of unity, and even though it felt surreal to stand there, she realized her voice was the echo of many. Your colleagues? Mr. Stevens interrupted, his tone dripping with skepticism. Their voices are a distraction from the objectives at hand. I can't be bothered with this agenda of unheard cries. We have goals to meet. And what good are those goals if they come at the cost of our well-being? Clara countered, her voice steadier now. There was no turning back. She could feel her power rising like steam, hardening her determination. We can do better, Mr. Stevens. I believe we can achieve our targets while ensuring our people are respected. His silence hung in the air, but as Clara dared to hold his gaze, she noted the shifting shadows of doubt behind his eyes. His perception of leadership was rooted in authority, not collaboration. He seemed a man accustomed to dominance, but something unyielding sparked within Clara. Perhaps it was time to challenge leadership practices that served the few at the expense of the many. For once, he started slowly. Perhaps you could be right, if only slightly. Addressing these so-called grievances, I presume you have solutions? That question beckoned Clara forward into murky waters, where the unknown brewed both fear and excitement. What if she didn't have the answers? What if the confrontation turned on her, unraveling the threads of courage she managed to stitch together? Yes, I do, she responded, heart racing. They had ideas workshops, open forums, team-building exercises aimed at trust and understanding among departments. She laid bare their strategy, spilling it like a sacrifice on the altar of corporate culture. As she spoke, hope surged in her core. The possibilities opened like petals in sunlight. But with every bold word, a stinging doubt whispered, questioning whether she had deviated too far from her intended path. In this exchange, would she provide him with ammunition to shoot her down? Mr. Stevens shifted, a flicker of a smile breaking through his previous rigidity. You're quite the firebrand, aren't you? But such ideas mean little unless they can translate to numbers. Show me that they can benefit this company, and I may consider your proposal. The challenge ignited another wave of inspiration, pushing Clara to lay down the gauntlet of accountability. How could she rally her colleagues without creating fissures? Would they stand with her under scrutiny, knowing what was at stake? Numbers can be swayed, she replied, interjecting boldness into every word. But if employee satisfaction improves, retention rates follow, and those translate into savings and profits. We've done the math. The intensity of the moment washed over her. She sensed the intrigue underneath his skepticism, a delicate, thrilling mixture of tension and possibility. But what if Mr. Stevens pushed back? What if these ideas bombed, revealing her own lack of preparedness? In the depths of her turmoil, Clara realized she was not merely negotiating. She was redefining who she was as a professional and a human being. The person she had once been afraid, vying for approval, was falling away, replaced by a woman reaching for transformation. The path ahead was fraught, each choice intertwined with consequences that might endanger both her destiny and the futures of others. As she gathered her thoughts for her next rebuttal, Clara saw how this moment would redefine her not only in the eyes of Mr. Stevens, but in her own self-concept. Yet the question remained, what if this confrontation became the crucible that either forged groundbreaking alliances or wrought devastating isolation? Time hung suspended in the air, thick with uncertainty, as Clara braced herself for the imminent turning point. Could she solidify her role as a true advocate, or would she be met with a foundation that remained too rigid, too unwilling to change? Clara stood in Mr. Stevens' office, the gravity of the moment anchoring her to the ground. Gone were the days when her voice was a muted whisper echoing in the hollow halls of the mansion. Today, it reverberated with authority and purpose. "We need to address the discrepancies in employee satisfaction and productivity," she asserted, her tone imbued with a newfound solidarity. Every word felt not just like a step, but a leap into an uncharted territory she had long dreamed of inhabiting. Mr. Stevens' lips curled in an expression that was part skepticism, part reluctant curiosity. It was clear her insistence was shattering his preconceived notions, exposing him to a perspective he had long dismissed. "Show me your calculations, then," he replied, the challenge hanging between them much like Clara's own anxiety, but now it propelled her forward rather than holding her back. "What if we conducted an employee satisfaction survey?" she proposed, feeling the intensity of the moment pulse through her. "We can gather the data to back our claims and highlight the positive correlation between employee well-being and retention rates." She watched as Mr. Stevens' brow furrowed, his thoughts visibly shifting behind his steely demeanor. "Maybe," he began, his voice slightly softened, "but I'll entertain this only if you take responsibility for the outcomes. Your ideas will fall on your shoulders should they fail." Clara nodded, accepting the implicit challenge woven into his words. This was a deal with potential for levity, but it was also intertwined with the weight of accountability. "I'm ready," she asserted, confidence bolstering her resolve. An unfamiliar sense of ownership washed through her. Any fear of failure had given way to a fierce determination to ensure that this operation extended beyond her own success. It was about her colleagues and the dignified acknowledgement of their struggles, and she was more than equipped to embark on this journey. As Clara left the office, a rush of exhilaration washed over her. Each step felt lighter, lighter than she had ever imagined. She could already see beyond the horizon a workplace transformed by mutual respect and equality. The letters were no longer just faded papers that echoed the past. They had become the fuel for a movement grounded in authenticity and revelation. Over the next weeks, Clara and her colleagues meticulously surveyed their peers, drawing out stories that resonated with courage and vulnerability. The narrative that emerged was powerful. The data was irrefutable. She witnessed the timid voices of her fellow workers blossoming into confident proclamations of worth and respect. "Clara, you won't believe the feedback we received," Lisa exclaimed on one of their workdays, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "This is going to make a real impact." As days turned into weeks, Clara presented their findings and proposals to Mr. Stevens with a blend of anticipation and trepidation. The report felt like an embodiment of hope, a collective cry for change. When the moment arrived for her presentation, the room was charged with collective energy. Her colleagues were there, a testament to their unity, their shared strength empowering her with every word she pronounced. "Today, we stand before you not just as employees," Clara began, her voice resonating with authenticity. "We are the lifeblood of this organization, and we have valuable insights into how we can enhance not just our work experience, but also our productivity." As she spoke, she saw Mr. Stevens' expression shift from skepticism to genuine contemplation. With each statistic, each anecdotal account, she could effectively illustrate the compelling narrative they had forged together. Ultimately, better working conditions lead to lower turnover rates and enhanced productivity. Our talent is our strength, and nurturing it is not just a moral choice, it's a strategic necessity. She held her breath as silence enveloped the room, hanging on every reaction. Finally, Mr. Stevens broke the stillness, his voice steady, profoundly serious. This holds merit. We will implement your feedback sessions." Clara felt her heart swell with the stirrings of triumph. They had moved mountains together, forging dialogue between two worlds that had long stood apart. As the meeting concluded, Clara felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She had transformed from a subservient housekeeper into a respected advocate for change. The once oppressive walls of the mansion had transformed into a platform from which she could launch her aspirations, emboldened by the courage she never knew she possessed. The The feeling of success surged within her, knowing that she had not only given a voice to her peers, but had also found her own. The confident woman standing at that table contrasted starkly with the unsure figure who had once dusted the mansion's floors in silence. She had matured into a leader, redefining her identity and role within the very fabric of the place she had worked. The hard-won victory wrapped her in warmth, illuminating her path forward. As she exited Mr. Stevens' office, the world outside sparkled with opportunity. She had redefined her narrative not just for herself, but for her community. Clara smiled, taking a moment of satisfaction. This was not merely an ending. It was the beginning. Now more than ever, the urgency rang clear. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.